I'm Sarah Tulip. I'm the chair of the Regional Productivity Forum for this area, so was really pleased to be asked to come and chair this panel. We did something similar last year, and it was a really interesting event and a really interesting panel, so I was glad to do it again. And I do a few other things that I probably won't get into, but one of the things I do have is I have a D&I organisation, I have a technology business, and I'm also a digital ambassador for Leeds. So I spend a lot of time in West Yorkshire, so sometimes it's particularly cool to come to South Yorkshire and hear, which is a little bit more about another region and actually how we compare. So really looking forward to this. So fantastic panel today. Really thinking about people management practices, productivity and the skills within the region. And before I introduce everybody, I had a little think about it. And I guess when you think about Yorkshire, Humber and the North East, it's a region that had really strong industrial bases around manufacturing, engineering and energy. And the world has very much changed since then, and the focus on those things. And I think, as the global economy evolves, the regions are changing. And I was thinking a little bit more about what are we famous for or what do we do now? And I was thinking it's, digital skills, green tech, advanced manufacturing, healthcare, life sciences, creative, and then thinking about things like fostering innovation and entrepreneurship. We've really gone through a transition, and I think that's really, really exciting, because when we talk about us having such low productivity in this region, I do think we're doing things, and we've kind of taken it almost upon ourselves when there's been a lack of investment and infrastructure and skills, that we have tried to build something ourselves as well. So I think there's so many positives. So interesting panel. I'm going to let everybody have 2 minutes to introduce themselves, because I always think it's nicer that somebody does it themselves, because I'll probably get, not get the key things in. So we have Dawn, Alice, Jonathan, Jill and Kamal. I'm going to start at this end with you, Jill. So if you want to take 2 minutes, quick intro, and then we'll go into questions.
Hi there. I'm Jill Cooper, and I'm Exec Director for the South Yorkshire Institute of Technology. There are 21 IoTs across the country, and we're lucky in South Yorkshire to have one of them. The IoT is a partnership of the 4 FE colleges and 2 universities in the region, and the focus is an umbrella to really promote that level 4-5 technical education. We all know that the major push over recent years has been to go from school, college and get a degree, but obviously not everybody needs a degree, and we do need a lot more people qualified at level 4-5. So under the umbrella of the IoT, we're promoting those level 4-5 qualifications, including apprenticeships in engineering, construction, digital and health. And really it's an umbrella, so you'll see a programme advertised at the university with their brand, but it will also have our brand. And the other big part is collaboration, so encouraging closer collaboration amongst the education providers, which again is then about maximising resources across the region.
Thank you.
I'm Jonathan Cooper. I co-chair the CIPD branch here in South Yorkshire and District, and I also run my own business called the Unlearning Company. I started my business 5 years ago, and the reason I started my business was because having worked in learning and development for an extended period of time, I noticed that many organisations struggle with the transfer of skills from the training that they do into workplace practice. And what I wanted to do through my business was to enable the transfer of those skills into productive habits. And so that sees me looking at the system really of an organisation, its organisational design, the way that people work, and the skills and capabilities that people have, and studying those, and then bringing people together to find new ways of working that are significantly more productive.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Dawn Huntrod. I am the Regional Director for the North of England for Make UK. Make UK is a representative voice of manufacturing, and I have the absolute pleasure of working with all the businesses who are in membership across the North East, North West and the North Yorkshire region. It's a fascinating job. I get to go into factories, we see them at their best, we see them at their worst, but most of all we're there to support and help them thrive and grow in business. I haven't always done this role. I've done this for 5 years, but before that I've spent my time working in local authorities, being a business advisor and coach, that kind of thing. So for me it's always fascinating to be involved in events like this, so looking forward to engaging today.
Thank you.
And hi all, I'm Alice Redborough. I'm an Assistant Director at the South Yorkshire Mayoral Combined Authority, covering growth business and skills policy. So South Yorkshire Mayoral Combined Authority, for those that don't know, we're based in Sheffield, but we're a combined authority. So we're made up of Sheffield, Barnsley, Rotherham and Doncaster, with the kind of mayor working with the leaders of each authority to make up the combined authority. I kind of say I cover growth, business and skills policy. So that is because of the devolution agenda happening over the past several decades, but particularly ramped up in the past 5 years or so. We have powers over things like the adult education budget, now the adult skills fund. So I think that's why I'm here today, to talk a bit about that.
Perfect, thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Kamal Birdy. I'm a professor of work psychology from the management school at Sheffield. I'm also part of the Institute of Work Psychology, where we look at issues such as enhancing well-being in the workplace, better understanding of leadership and teamwork, and creativity and innovation. I suppose that's my particular area about creativity and innovation, is understanding what helps us or hinders us be more creative, but also the innovative side about actually putting those ideas into practice. So we've done lots of research around that, but we're also quite keen on practice. So we've worked with lots of organisations from lots of different sectors to try and help them improve their skills around problem solving, creativity, collaboration, using our Clear Ideas model. And I have to thank Simca for funding our recent round of workshops with regional businesses and charities. And I think some people who've done it are here today as well. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. So we thought what we'd do is have 2 key topics. So changing needs across the region, and people management productivity. So we're going to work through those, and then the thought is to really hopefully inspire the conversation on the panel to get people to want to ask questions and get involved a little bit. So we're going to try and so if you've got questions, please write them down, and we'll come round to those. And what I'd like to do with the panel is I'll throw the question out to somebody, and then if anybody else would like to come in, if they just want to raise, and then we'll try and make sure that everybody gets an opportunity for the things that they'd really like to speak about. So I'm going to start fairly broadly, and I think I touched on it from the beginning, but looking at needs across the region, how are business skills needs changing in the region? And I know it's a very broad region because Yorkshire, Humber and the North East is very broad, and we've got a focus today on South Yorkshire. But would anybody like to start that off?
I'm happy to take a stab, kind of preempting this kind of thing. Make UK, we've just recently, we're going through the writing of the Industrial Strategy Skills Commission paper, and I've kind of got an interim report. It's going to be a bit boring, sorry, I'm going to look and read as I go because it's all just fresh in the last week or so. So the key challenges that we're seeing across the board from that snapshot survey that we do is obviously an ageing workforce and increasing retirement rates, people leaving the industry. The apprenticeship and technical education systems are not helping employers to recruit enough young people with the skills and knowledge. The green and digital transitions are changing the skills needed by manufacturers, and upskilling and retraining the existing workforce is growing in importance, but without a policy framework to match. So I've just picked those 4 because if that kind of triggers any kind of questions, then something to go with that.
No, that's interesting. And I guess as well from what Peter said earlier, that are we actually putting the right skills in at the beginning as well? So, Jill.
I would also say, looking back over the last sort of 10, 20 years, a lot of the skills needs are exactly the same. Your average SME, for example, in engineering, they still need pneumatic skills, hydraulic skills, the electrical skills, the electronic skills. So a lot of that underpinning skills are the same as they've always been in those key sectors. But obviously, as with any industry, you're also faced with that continual change. So apart from those core skills that still need to be delivered, whether it's through school, college, in business, There are obviously those higher tech skills, say the use of AI, for example, robotics, that obviously are changing the landscape, and very difficult for education and training providers to respond to necessarily in real time, because industry is almost here before you can even get ready to deliver some form of new training.
Yeah, and I think I work in the digital sector, and I have spent a lot of time in consultancy, so I've been out to lots of businesses and said every industry is digital now, you need to be digital, and maybe that's part of our, our sales pitch as well. But do you think, if you were taking it from a perspective of digital skills, do you think that less, is that becoming more important? I don't know, Alice.
Yeah, so I think definitely one of the government initiatives in recent years were these local skills improvement plans, which are kind of bringing different partners together in the region. And the one kind of developed and focused on South Yorkshire was all about digital skills and the needs of those in the region. I would say I think that's a similar demand across different regions. I think there are some areas where South Yorkshire maybe underperforms in terms of digital literacy, but we're not completely out of kilter to other regions and areas. And in terms of how skills needs are changing in the region, so we updated our kind of regional skills strategy last year, and we focused on kind of 3 big challenges or missions, and some of it is kind of consistent problems. Kind of our second mission was all about kind of core knowledge and attainment, so kind of trying to get people up. So 16% of people had no formal qualifications in the census in 2021. I don't know if that's particularly shifted over the past couple of decades, but there are some kind of intangible challenges that you need to focus on, and kind of supporting people to have basic digital literacy, maths knowledge, not just for their current job, but also to be kind of resilient to labour market changes in the future. Another kind of big challenge for us and our focus of the skills strategy, and I think is probably a change for the region in the past couple of decades, is, and it's less about training necessarily, but it's the fact that I think in the region we don't necessarily have an employment challenge anymore. It's an inactivity challenge and people kind of facing long-term chronic health. So a lot of focus at the moment about how you can bring kind of health, welfare and skills and training together to kind of support people to move closer to or back into work. And then finally at the kind of higher skill end, so kind of maybe your level 4 plus changes that we're seeing in the region. I think this is really interesting where, again, you need an adaptable skills base, and again, a lot of those kind of technical skills are still needed, but they're going to be applied to new and emerging industries. So lots happening in advanced manufacturing of kind of relation to digital skills, and so and kind of digital engineering or health tech. And so it's still kind of you still need those kind of higher level technical skills, but you need a really flexible and resilient workforce as well. So it's at once kind of have these specific sectors that are growing in the region that we want to support. We've also got to kind of retain flexibility in the sense that if you just focus on a particular technical skill, you're going to kind of miss that translation of skills across sectors and businesses, which is what we really want to encourage, because that's how you get innovation and growth.
Does Jonathan, do you want to?
Yeah, I think I'd like to put a slightly different perspective on the gap. I think change the paradigm. I think when we have the skills conversation, we tend to look back at the things that we haven't got currently or that we've missed, because the world has advanced so quickly, and we find ourselves trying to fill those gaps. And as the result of looking behind us in the rearview mirror about what we've missed, we tend to spend less time looking forward about what is coming. And certainly my experience in L&D when I worked in industry, when we focused on the future, we covered the things that had happened in the past because we needed to give a context for the things that were going to happen. So I think there's a real need to instead of be thinking about the gap that we have, think about what we'll need in 5 years' time. Focus on that, go for it, and the others will catch up, and then we'll find ourselves, in a virtuous cycle. The other thing that I experience in my work is often It's not always the technical skills that are missing. That actually I can be really great in my role. However, if I'm unable to connect with my colleagues in our internal supply chain, for example, and have some level of knowledge about the intersections between my work, then I can't be effective, because we're always talking at cross purposes and we're always fighting about limited resources, instead of kind of coming together and understanding collectively about what needs to be done. So I would suggest the other skill that will help us move forward is educating either ourselves or those around us about the different functions, so that people are. I like the analogy of people are T-shaped. I've got the depth of the area that I'm specialist in, but I've also got breadth across the top, which helps me connect in the organisation more fully.
Yeah, I'll chip in on 3 areas, I think, from my experience. I think well-being, it's really good to know that over 30 years that I've been doing this, that well-being has come up the agenda now, is recognised. It is a crucial aspect. As you said, people are business, as we've heard. There's more about how, the skills about how we improve well-being of the workforce. So it's better understanding of strategies and interventions. So we talk about primary well-being interventions, which is maybe someone's had burnout. So they might get counselling. We talk about secondary, which is sort of in almost trying to inoculate people through stress management training. But I think it's the third strategy is most important, which is probably not looked at, which goes to good jobs, is designing good jobs and good workplaces in the first place. Because you can inoculate someone, but if you keep on throwing them back into shark-infested waters, they're just going to come back out and need more patching up again. So I think we need better understanding about what makes good jobs, and we talk about demands versus resources, the demands people have, physical demands, the social demands, their job demands, but also the resources they have, physical, mental. Social support is very important with that. And I think there's some good understanding what makes for good jobs. We still need to know more about that and how we implement that. And autonomy and choice is something about that, and participation that helps people give a sense of agency and involvement, and also some control over maybe some of those demands that are coming at them as well. So that's part of what we're trying to do, is try and raise that understanding of good jobs and different approaches we can do to help our employees become more healthy. And part of that is also, I think, evaluation. I think that point about how do you measure productivity, how do you measure an increase in well-being, how do you measure the impact of the interventions that we do. So as researchers, we try and develop methodologies and frameworks. A colleague of mine, late Corinne Nielsen, developed an IGLOO model, which was about evaluating the impact of wellbeing interventions at different levels. That's been taken up by more and more organisations now as a way of, this is a really good framework to assess the impact at different levels. So that's around the wellbeing end. I suppose innovation is an area I know more about. There's more requests, more interest now about innovation skills and what that means, and skills for different parts of the innovation process. So some organisations are very good at analysing problems, or, we come up with lots of ideas here, but then we struggle to actually put them into practice. Other organisations are very good at putting things into practice that aren't particularly new. So a part of our role is to try and develop skills across all that process and use our research understanding to say, okay, what makes for more creative ideas, what makes for better sort of leadership and engagement with users. And we try and turn that research into practice through the training interventions that we do and the advice that we give to organisations. And the third thing I'll put in there is collaboration. And I think you've mentioned that, about working across functions and across silo working is something that I get told about so much, is that, we're a bit locked into this. How do we work with others more effectively within organisations, across organisations? So again, it's trying to understand how we create shared visions. So, for example, we've been working in the water industry about developing collaborative innovation strategies and policies, and United Utilities have taken up one of our sort of toolkits now and is using it on their transformational innovation projects. So I think there is a pipeline about understanding and gathering evidence, but also maybe trying to turn that into practice. So I'd encourage people to talk to universities. We're from Sheffield universities, but other universities are available. There's lots of research that they would be really happy to have that conversation, and that need, actually, to how do we translate that research into practice. So, collaborate with academics as well.
Thank you. So I'm reflecting on, I sort of had some questions where we were going to go with this, and I think I'm reflecting as well from the conversations that have been had today, and I was thinking about talking about, you know, sort of, is our current approach to education training of young people coming through sufficient at the moment? And just reflecting on some of the conversations, we might say that the school curriculum doesn't reflect the workplace now, that that gap is growing, that we talked about half the population between age, I think it was 25 and 29, over half have got a degree. The work doesn't generally reflect that from a percentage of people where we need that sort of level of skill base. That people coming out of university aren't work ready. And so I work with a lot of people who have built boot camps within their businesses, or, you know, like, or the, you know, that people are paying to transition from university to business. So I think it's quite a big problem, and I don't think it's isolated to this region, but I wonder what people's thoughts were around the approach of what we're doing at the moment, and maybe their thoughts around what we could do different. Jill, you'd like to come in?
I think it's a constant challenge because, as Peter said earlier, employers are much less patient now. They want that person who's going to slot into their business and start performing tomorrow, which is unrealistic. Education and training can only go so far. For example, within any education environment, they will only have certain pieces of equipment. They won't necessarily have what you have in the workplace. So I think in terms of employers' expectations, I think they need to step back and say, actually, this person has this level of skill and knowledge, but now I need to bring them in and make them an employee. And how do I go about doing that? I think it's a big ask to expect somebody who's only ever been in education, for example, to then step into work and know and understand everything. On the other side, in education, we're always restricted by the funding regulations and what we are allowed to deliver that can draw down funding, for example. And if there was an ask of government or local government, I would say more flexibility. So, for example, not everybody needs a full qualification. So we should have more funding support to enable individuals and employers to maybe invest, but not in something that's going to take a year or 2 years, where they might only need an individual to do something that's a shorter programme. It might be still a part of a qualification, but that would then make an impact in the workplace. We have far too high a focus on qualifications as a whole. And I get it, because the government can then say, oh, we have 23% qualified to level 4, and that compares internationally X, Y, and Z, but it's not necessarily meeting the needs of local businesses and local people.
Again, I'm going to bore you with stats.
I love a stat.
We love a stat, and I will get this information shared with you guys, so you can have a look at this. But when we look at the main barriers to employer engagement with in skills training, it's very interesting that 42% of manufacturers believe they have insufficient time to actually train their staff. Internal training budget reduced because of increases in other business areas. That's 26%. Internal training budget reduced due to, again, higher employment costs. That's 26%. When you start to look at those percentages, it really is quite difficult. Government schemes, you talked about skills boot camps, these are fantastic. Again, 24%. Local training providers do not offer or have withdrawn relevant apprenticeship training as 22%. Goes back to what you're saying about understanding how that money is kind of moved around. Lack of appetite from employees to access training. And I mean, in my position going around in different businesses, you've got the super phenomenal Arlas of the world that you've got that kind of plan laid out. But then you also have other businesses who just don't have that plan, and all they want is somebody with the right attitude who's going to learn the skills of the job and get on with it, and you see that all the time. So that's just a few facts.
Can I just add as well, I think in any business where, things are tight, and for a lot of businesses they are very often the first budgets they cut is marketing and training. And they're the two budgets that they should be spending money on. And businesses have got to realise that without that investment, they're putting their business at risk long term. And I think also businesses have to be more willing to engage with education providers and also invest in skills. And bear in mind that the average person will probably move job every 3 or 4 years. So yes, you may put somebody through an apprenticeship, for example, and they move on, but you are committing to the skills of the region. Sorry, I'm hitting my microphone, wave me on. And you have to be able to, where you can, take that broader picture. And so that skills are more relevant, I would ask all employers, are you engaged with your local education providers? They need you desperately. They need you to do, as was mentioned earlier, go and do mock interviews with students, talk about your experience as an individual in an industry. Let your staff, your managers, spend time. It doesn't have to be a lot of time. It might only be once a year, but going and engaging with local schools, colleges, universities, that's the way that you will help educators stay in touch with what employers want. You'll help your students, young people and mature students understand what is expected of them in work, and also hopefully attract people to you as a business. And without that, everybody's going to struggle, but employers have got to be prepared to commit to that.
Yeah. And I think maybe there's a little bit of a flip on that as well, because it's expensive to go to university. If you think about going to university now, and with such a high percentage of people coming out of university, and university isn't teaching employability, is university taking accountability in some ways from that perspective? And I do think that comes down to collaboration, and it has to be business or industry working with the university. So I don't know if you
Yeah, I'd like to just reinforce what Jill was saying. It's about better engagement between employers and universities. I was just looking at some feedback from a module we had in the first semester, and we brought in an external speaker who runs Greentop Community Circus. The feedback was brilliant. They said we really liked hearing from him because he brought in the challenges the organisation was having, got the students to have a look at what solutions they could come up with, and they wanted more of that. And you know, you can light the spark in a lot of these people by coming and just simply sharing what it's like in your organisation, the skills that are needed, because then it really helps them make the connection between what they're learning and what's needed out there as well. I was just talking to someone else on our table about they had a company project with a student last year. Now they're working for the company now. It's a good way to help bring people into the organisation by doing a research project and get a sense of actually will they fit and how can we help them develop and grow. I think as a university as well, we've got some great colleagues. We're all reflecting on skills now and big skills, about reflecting what core skills are you developing that could be useful in the workplace, not just content, knowledge of this and that, but what skills are you developing. There's a program called My Skills where people are asked to reflect on examples that they can again take forward to interviews. And employability is a big thing as well. It's about what can we help develop that will help employability. So we're trying to reflect on that. We're doing things, but we really do need that engagement with employers to really steer us in the right direction as well. And at the end of the day, it's about those students being motivated and being prepared so they're much better fit into the organisations when they get there. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, just kind of build on that point on how kind of the approach to education and training might be changing, and also the kind of opportunity that devolution has given the region in South Yorkshire, but I'm sure it's the case for other regions, in terms of budget flexibility, is now we've been able to set up programs, and I'm going to plug it because the team are sat right there, called Skills Bank, which is kind of a co-investment tool between the authority and employers. So it kind of reduces the cost of training and encourages people to invest in their workforce. Another one is kind of the Apprenticeship Hub and Levy Matchmaking, which is an opportunity to kind of raise the profile of apprenticeships in the region and encourage kind of the transfer of levy across organisations. Just a few small examples of how kind of flexibility in adult education funding is changing and kind of personalising some of the programmes and support in the region in South Yorkshire, but I know is the case for other regions in Yorkshire and Humber as well.
Yeah, great. And Jonathan?
I'd like to suggest a slightly different paradigm again, and this time I think that the fact that employers don't feel as though they don't have enough time to train people or engage in the skills of young people joining their organisations. I would point, in my experience, to the fact that often senior leaders don't have the time to, or find it difficult to find the time to think forward, to think strategically. And in my experience, again, the reason they don't have the time to think forward is because their middle management population isn't necessarily managing systems and processes. That population of people are working down, and they're supporting the people on the line to do the day-to-day tasks, to get product out to customers, to deliver effectively on the value stream. And I don't see a possible change until all of those roles are elevated to their correct position, where the people working on the value stream are given the opportunity to do the job and encouraged to do that, and given time to learn to do that effectively and supported to work independently, so that first line managers can do their job. The managers can do their job of managing the organisation, then giving leaders the opportunity to think forward. And I think when we can get to a place where leaders get that opportunity to think forward, to have that role of walking around the castle walls of their organisation to see what's coming, we will never be able to break the cycle of finding it difficult, of being able to introduce new people into our organisations in an effective way.
Yeah, and I think that's right, and I think that also brings it back to that reduction in the investment in training and development, and actually if those people were getting more money towards training and development and had that as well, would those leaders be progressing more quickly, and are actually the exec board holding it back by not making that investment? So I think some interesting questions there. So before we move on, I'm just going to very quickly, and I think just if anybody has a quick addition to this, how do you think we can lessen obstacles people might face entering the job market at the moment? Does everybody have maybe like one idea, one thought that they have? Go on.
Well, anybody who knows me knows that I constantly ask our manufacturers to open up their doors. Make UK, 3 years ago, we created the National Manufacturing Day. It's the last Thursday in September. It's a huge opportunity for any employer to open their door, to showcase the kind of things that happen behind those doors. It's a way that, we spent a long time, we've heard educators saying to people, if you don't do very well, you'll end up in a factory. That's not what we want to hear. What we want is the kids to go, well, actually, I've been in there. Do you know what they make? Do you know where it goes in the world? We're sitting on this plane. Do you know where that's been made? There's so many fabulous opportunities, and to get people behind it, if I can ask any of the employers in here to do one thing, Google National Manufacturing Day, put your details in, it's free, we don't hassle you, but you'll get templates, letters and things for you to actually talk to your local MP, talk to schools to get those children, get those young people, unemployed, doesn't matter, get them through the door and see what you actually do behind there.
Perfect.
Sorry for the pinch.
Yeah, so I think in terms of like the one thing, and there's never one thing, but for people who are facing big barriers to entering work, and I talked earlier a bit about how in this region, but also it's a trend across the UK, it's kind of long-term illness, kind of chronic health, facing big barrier to work. The one thing that we could do that makes a massive difference is to ensure that those people get focused, targeted, almost like one-on-one, or like them to a few group of people support in terms of how to navigate the labour market, integration with like their healthcare plans and that support with the welfare system. That is, the evidence just suggests that is targeted focused support is how you can help those people feel confident to re-enter the labour market. Now that is a big challenge and really hard to do, but I think there is kind of real focus and moment on that at the moment. There was the Pathways to Work Commission, kind of created from South Yorkshire Mayoral Combined Authority in Barnsley, which was published last July and is now turning into a pilot, which is really great, got national support for it. But if I was to kind of say one thing, that is what it would be.
Anybody else?
I think remembering as an employer that people are making a choice about you too,
Yeah.
I think would change our approach to recruitment. The fact that we have a role on offer, the person is also making a choice about whether or not they want to come and work in our organisation. And I see that whole recruitment process as a hospitality event. It's encouraging people to come and see us at our best, but also offering an environment which fit. What am I trying to say? Recruitment, when you're going through an interview in an assessment centre, it can feel like this massive hurdle, a barrier to actually bringing myself as I am, such that you can see who I am as a real person with all the things that I've got to offer. Because if I'm so nervous that I don't bring my best, actually the person that misses out is you as the employer. It's the other person's missing out too. So I think we need to rethink how we go about that process and make that much more an environment where people can bring their best selves and feel comfortable, feel welcome, and it feel hospitable.
Don't cut your training budget. Invest, please. Invest more where you can in education and training of existing staff, as well as looking at bringing in new people. And I'm not just talking about young people there, because it's a long-term investment in your business, and that will link to the productivity of your business. But make sure you make informed choices when you're doing that.
Yeah, I'd just reinforce that opportunity for students at university to be able to work on real-life challenges collaboratively with yourselves, but also with each other. I think with the pandemic, there's a big shift to working on your own. We're trying to manage that and deal with that now as we get cohorts of students coming along who are less, they could be sat next to each other, not talking, but just on their phones, And so we need these skills about being able to relate and work with other people. So working on real-life challenges, whatever discipline you're in, I think helps you realise that the skills and knowledge that you're developing can be used very usefully and gives you a sense of what work is like as well. So I think, again, please just throw these challenges and opportunities at universities. They'll be happy to work with you, think about how they could be then embedded in programmes.
Yeah, and I know I'm not on the panel, but I'm passionate about something, so I'm just going to say one thing, if you don't mind. So I think for me, something that I've been passionate about working with schools in disadvantaged areas, and because people's families previously worked in industries that don't exist anymore, there could be third generation unemployment within those communities, and it can be a full street, it can be a full community. And I think it's very hard for those children to have aspirations because they don't see work around them. And one of the real ways to do that, I think, is to get into schools. And I think it's an extension of what Dawn said, really.
Absolutely.
They can't be those things because they've never seen those things. They've never been in an office. They've never been in a factory. They just don't have any sort of expectation. So I think for me, one of the biggest barriers is allowing and inspiring those children to be able to see things, because I think that can make the real difference. Okay. So we're going to move on. The other thing we were going to talk about was people management and productivity. So we've got probably about just over 20 minutes left. So maybe we'll sort of a couple of people answer each of these questions. So it's something you're passionate about, so your hand up. We're going to go through 3 questions if we have time. Then we'll take it out to the room. So we're going to talk about employers and considering the potential impact of their practices around HR and business. They're focusing on productivity. They're trying to make changes, but they're not always, I guess, when they're improving productivity, beneficial for employees. So do you think there's a way that you can do that around having mutual gains where actually the business and the employees benefit? So anybody have some thoughts around that?
I'm going to quote here as well from the productivity report, part of the report that we did, that improved productivity is one of the main benefits of the significant increase we've seen when investment in the workforce and health and well-being has been taken on board. It includes investment for line managers, something you've talked about, managers needing more training. I've got a question though. What makes the best manager? For me, is it the person who came in at 16 and worked their way up? Or is it the person that gets helicoptered in from another organisation that's maybe learnt different ideas from universities? And I'm just going to put that question out there as well. You know, I think it's something, you do your paradigms and you're flipping things around.
Okay. I think in terms of great managers, if we look for the qualities of a great manager, it doesn't matter whether they've come into the organisation at 16 and risen, or whether they've come externally. Great leaders and managers are people that know how to connect the hearts of the people in their team with the purpose, and know how to make what I'm doing feel relevant today, so that I can see that I'm making a difference. And that's universal, and so I don't think it matters to answer your question.
I was being flippant.
And I joined in, and took the.
But people are laughing.
Yeah, it's good, isn't it?
Just on the productivity question and the kind of impact on employees. I mean, in an ideal world, productivity is just a metric to kind of measure the success and I guess the health of a business, and you'd hope that increasing productivity would lead to kind of a workforce that feels invested in, that kind of feels purposeful, that has good work, and often we kind of assume that is happening. And of course there are some instances where maybe it doesn't or there's not, and that might be because of kind of perceptions in kind of leadership in what kind of investment in the workforce might look like, or what support looks like. And I think, just speaking from a kind of government or mayoral combined authority view, some of the things that we do that kind of tackle or get at that kind of gap between what does it mean to be productive and what does it mean to have kind of healthy and supported workforce are kind of programs that kind of engage with people who might be at risk of falling out of work. So kind of big thing about like occupational health and how do you support people in work who aren't maybe getting kind of sometimes really basic support around kind of just like healthy kind of desk practices, but it can go all the way to kind of a way that managers engage with them, kind of set tasks. So we have a few programs like Work Well that kind of try and bridge that gap. And that's kind of obviously the government getting involved to kind of correct what's seen as a failure, but you'd hope over time, and I think we've talked a bit about how kind of well-being is raising up the agenda, but over time there's kind of that gap between productivity and what is to be good work, and kind of productivity equaling having a supportive, healthy workforce will close.
Yeah, I'd just like to add a bit of research evidence to this. So Peter was talking earlier about, causation and correlation. So I'm just going to talk about a study we did, it's quite a few years ago now, but we looked at 300 manufacturing organisations, and we asked when they'd introduced 7 practices, 4 of them were operational practices. I've written them down to remind me now. So when they'd introduced 4 operational practices, either total quality management, just in time, supply chain partnering and business process re-engineering, and also when they're introduced 3 types of people-focused practices. So one was empowerment, devolving responsibility for decision making away from managers to individuals and teams, extensive training and development initiatives, and then introducing teamwork. What we did there was we gathered financial productivity data for 22 years for those companies, so we could look at before the practice were introduced and what happened afterwards. And do you want to guess which one practice was most consistently effective improving productivity, or related to an improvement in productivity? Empowerment. So there's a 7% increase in value added across all the organisations, regardless of sector. That was 7%, and then with training, extensive training and development, we had a 2% increase in value added. So with training and empowerment, we had 9% increase. When you start looking at other practices, no other practices had that consistent effect. It really varied across sector, etc. So we have to start thinking about contingencies and maybe where things are appropriate or not, or how they're implemented. But that was a bit of evidence we tried to gather over time about, and it wasn't immediate, as people said. You had to wait 2 or 3 years before then the uplift to be seen. And we know, if you look at chance, that's unlikely to happen due to chance across those organisations. So there's been a lot of work going on about what we call high-performance work practices. You may have come across them. There's a guy called Mark Huslid in the States sort of set off that dialogue. And it's about bundles of HR practices, and there's more and more evidence about them being more engaged, involved employees, being in companies that have got great levels of productivity. High performance work practices are things like selective fair recruitment. It is about good quality training and development. It is about good performance management. It's about open communication. Key thing to put on top of that isn't just about having those bundles of practices. It's about making sure they're integrated and harmonized, because what you see is you get a more powerful effect. And what was really nice to hear from like Gripple today and Arla was there was integration going on there. So they weren't seen as separate practices, but here's a core vision, here's core values, these are the things we're recruiting for, these are the things we're developing on, these are the things that we're rewarding on as well. So there is evidence in the literature out there about these practices impacting positively on productivity. Of course, there's always more research to be done, there's more need to understand contingencies, but there is a growing body of evidence to show there is a link about these people practices that do make an effect on productivity.
I would just add an element on engagement. I think one of the areas that I know I've worked with businesses who've missed it, where you'll go into a workplace, you'll see lovely KPI targets, how we did this week, how we did last week, and so on and so forth. If you ask the staff, they're just what they get told they've done, this today, last week, whatever, and they have no understanding of anything beyond that. And the more an individual understands their role within, as was said earlier, the broader context of the business and how their work impacts on colleagues in other departments, for example, let alone the productivity of the business, then the more you will see that commitment of an individual to their performance and therefore productivity. If they're kept in a silo, or if they don't understand, why those KPIs, for example, what does it relate to me and my job, then, what's the point in having them? I think that ongoing communication, engagement with staff and making sure they understand where they sit within the organisation, and even if they're a tiny cog, how important they are. It's like that story about the cleaner, isn't it? And the going off to the moon. I can't remember the story now, but every element, every job is important, and very often people don't understand that, and that will impact on their performance and productivity.
So there was just one thought I wanted to add around that, and I guess, speaking to a lot of CXO and what their priorities are for 2025 and have been in the back end of 2024 has been cutting costs, and within that has been using technology to automate and AI, and they're very big conversations that are happening. And when we're thinking about being able to increase productivity, that will probably take away some of the lower level manual tasks, the part-time workers, and actually this is probably an area of concern for me from a perspective of where this just isn't going to happen. And one of my big concerns around that, I guess, is the effect that it'll have on women. I think Peter mentioned earlier that a lot of the part-time work and low-level work is done by women because they manage it around childcare and other needs and the home and other caring responsibilities because they have more to juggle. And I think that that's going to have a huge impact on women within the workforce from a perspective of their roles being automated. So just wanted to finish with some doom and gloom for women there, because that's how I roll. And it's something I'm very passionate about. So we've got a little bit of time left, so I really wanted to just throw the opportunity for people to ask some questions. I think it was such an amazing panel. Would anybody like to delve deeper with anyone? I'm going to...
It's Nick Pearson from Sheffield Occupational Health Advisory Service. I just want to pick up on some things that Karina talked about and Kamal has talked about. Because I think what we're saying is, from a productivity point of view, that doing the same thing isn't actually going to get us very far. So I'm thinking, should we be encouraging organisations to look at, for instance, different types of organisational structure? So, for instance, to give you an example, then one of the things that is quite interesting is about holacratic organisational design, because we know that the pros of that kind of design encourages innovation, promotes employee engagement, which you know is on the decline, but it also supports transparency within organisations, which is something that we know that the Gen Z group of employees, that's really important for them. So I've just wondered what your thoughts on the panel about looking at different types of organisational design to improve productivity and innovation.
Yeah, I'm happy to kick off. I think part of what we're trying to do is get people to ask the questions and give them permission to ask the questions about why and why not, and the understanding of things change and they're changing more rapidly, and to think a bit to the future. So I think it is about getting people to take a bit of time to then reflect about how things fit together and how they could be different, and allow themselves to dream and go down different dreams, because sometimes we are a bit too narrow in what's happening next. And what we find in our sort of workshops is quite good. People like that time to just think a bit more longer term and what things could look like. I think the other thing is about that inclusion, is about voice, is about making sure people have a voice in that vision. And often people haven't had that voice, they haven't been included in the conversation. So we're very keen on trying to help people understand the importance of that voice and how to encourage that voice as well. Because, you know, people... those younger generations are going to be the future, so they should have some understanding of maybe where they want things to go as well. And, you know, those insights and new ways of doing things are what we should always be looking at.
Anybody else?
I think the only thing I'd say is working with young people. I've got 2 boys in their late 20s. And I hear a lot from their friends and colleagues as well as students about their expectations in the workplace. And I don't think that the traditional models of managing a business and managing people are necessarily going to be the way we need to do things into the future. I know, for example, young people today, their attention span is not necessarily more than a gnat. So, you know, and they're used to having their phone in their hand and having the laptop open and having the TV open and having a conversation. And so the way they operate, we have to think about how we then assimilate them into the workplace. But that then also leads to, well, how do we manage them as a business? And how do we tap into things like the innovation that they could potentially bring, those young minds, that creativity? So I do think that as a business, one of the areas to look at is the business structure and organisation, and is it right for the way the future of your business is going to develop?
Alice, did you want to?
Yeah, I mean, kind of a similar point, but I think obviously within the Mayoral Combined Authority we talk a lot about economic growth and kind of the need for and the purpose of it, kind of about raising living standards, and within that has touched on different business models and the kind of employer ownership models, and done work in here and there about this topic and kind of the lens of how do we change perceptions about productivity, but also think about productivity differently. And I think, like, I guess my main point is it is appropriate in some cases, but I think the main focus for us is where we do kind of extend support to businesses, making sure that we have kind of a holistic ecosystem of support. That's, you know, it might be to some people it is about thinking about different structures of ownership or governance. To some it might be about like leadership training. So I think we're more thinking about what's the kind of plurality of support and where we best kind of support businesses in this region, rather than kind of, you know, we're going to go for this type of ownership model, for example.
Should we go to the...
I was simply going to say, in my experience, no matter what the structure, however a business is organised, the same, we can get, I believe we can get sort of tied into a particular way of doing things, and a structure can almost become a stick to beat ourselves with. And I think there's a need for both structure but also flexibility, so that, you know, the structure, The structure is there to provide us with something to help navigate ourselves around the organisation. But just because we navigate in a particular way doesn't mean there might not be a shortcut. Reading a map, we might find a footpath that one road is blocked to us, so we take a different route. So I think it's a case of not either or, but considering all options and allowing people to see how to navigate, but then also so that they can make up their own mind about how to get things done.
I think for myself, I mean, I've had over 40 years in industry, and when I look at organisations like Primary Engineer, these are very young children where people are going in and you give them, we do invent something for the future. And you get those young minds who, yes, they might all be designing a chair that they're going to sit in and watch their game and while they're gaming and do everything else. That is quite common. But when you see how bright these young minds are and open, that's the time to be kind of instilling. And as I've moved as a STEM ambassador throughout my career and met older and older children, the more the curriculum restricts them on having to achieve for various O-levels or whatever it is they're doing, what then happens is that creativity kind of gets pushed to the back. And it's what do we do in between all of that? And I think, some engineers that I speak to, they say, give me a child. I will make that child into the best engineer because the creativity, because they want to explore and do things. So it's what do we do to engage that, really, isn't it?
Perfect. Any other questions?
Thank you. It was less of a question and more like a joining some of the dots up a little bit, I think, just listening to you talk. And when you talked about designing great jobs, I was thinking, well, that's really specific and really individual, because a great job for me is not a great job for you. So as HR professionals, as leaders of business, how do we think about that? And I didn't really intend on sharing my personal life story today when I came here, but I'm going to share a little bit of it, just in the spirit of optimism and positivity and the strapline of an Ironman, which is anything is possible. Because I actually, I think I'm from Doncaster, so I'm born and bred in Doncaster, and proud Yorkshire lass of a family from the northeast, and I found myself a single parent at the age of 20. No home of my own, no education. I had struggled to get through my A-levels. And somewhere in the mix of that, I realised that no one was coming to save us, so I needed to go and do something. And I found my local careers service, who did some sort of assessment, and it's that long ago now, I can't really remember what it was, but it was something that said, Claire, here's the occupations that you might be good at. And I had loved business studies at school. So HR came up, and I thought, right, okay, let's have a look at this then. And I spoke to somebody in Doncaster College, and I was on benefits, I was on housing benefit, I was on top-up because I was trying to work, I was trying to look after my little one. And I found my way through to a business and personnel degree course at Doncaster College. And it was probably the hardest 4 years of my life going through that, working, small child. But I found my purpose, right? So somebody helped me at that age. Oh, I'm getting emotional again. Sorry, this wasn't time. I found my purpose, and that purpose has carried me through many different businesses. So I love Arla. It's an amazing environment, but I've worked in lots of others that have been really, really tough. But because I was working to my skill set and my purpose, I found a way through. And I found a way through that I now pay more in tax than I ever received in benefits in 1 year at that time. And if we can join the dots up, we can make such a difference. I could have become a very different statistic from where I started 25 years ago. So there's something for me about the other little bit of that story, is my daughter's just gone to secondary school. So she's left primary, gone to secondary. And what I've noticed she's in an amazing school now. And Her primary school were doing everything they could, but what they did was they focused on what she wasn't great at. We're worried. She can't spell very well. Her handwriting's terrible. Her secondary school focused on what she's good at. She's amazing, and she's going to be amazing, and she's got so much potential. So how do we find those skills and capabilities in our younger generation and ignite their excitement around purpose so that they carry themselves through? Because I've been lucky enough to receive lots of great training in organisations, but I think my purpose and journey towards mastery, I would like to think, is driven by that, and so loads of self-development, loads of growth mindset, loads of stuff that I've gone out and found for myself. And I think in this day and age there's so much out there that individuals can go and learn for free. You know, the AI, ChatGPT, there's so much out there. There's something in that sweet spot of how do we identify at a young age what people are great at, and then they'll find their way through, I think.
Thank you.
Can I just say, and that's where we need employers, because very often a careers teacher in school is a teacher of a subject, and they get given that as a job role. And they probably did school, college, university, now a teacher. And they're trying to teach our children from primary school upwards about what careers there are. And that's another reason as employers, if you don't get engaged with the education system at primary, secondary, college, university, then how can you expect then to get people that you need coming out to the other end, and to understand what the job opportunities are as well, because that's such a changing environment today as well. And they only know what their parents tell them, what their best friend tells them or whatever, and their teacher tells them, and they've probably got a very small circle of experience. So that's another reason for you to get engaged.
So we've come to the end of the session, so I'd just like everybody to give the panel a round of applause. I thought you were amazing, so thank you so much.